That's brilliant. Right, let's make a start. So thank you all so much for coming. I know that lots of you watching are parents and carers, but lots of you also work with children and young people, and many of you are advocates for children and young people. We hope that tonight's webinar will make a real difference for children and young people in Scotland and elsewhere as well. I'm Annabel Turner, and I'm the director of Cybersafe Scotland, and I specialise in the prevention of online child sexual abuse and exploitation. And Ros and I actually met last year before all of this happened. And that's one of the reasons why we're hosting this webinar tonight, and why we knew it was so important to do it before the summer holidays. So I'm just so grateful that Ros is here tonight. She is an incredible woman. And I'm hugely grateful that we're joined with Paul Raffile. Paul is the leading international expert in researching this global crime. Paul has already played a part in the story of getting justice for Murray and for many others. And if you're on LinkedIn, I would highly recommend following him. He is an absolute warrior in this space. And I'm so glad that we're also joined by Kasia from Police Scotland. She has been working in this area for some years now. She has a focus on developing resources to help support the national response to this crime. Also on the panel, we have Caroline, who's going to be handling the Q&A. So thank you all so much for being here. Now, we want to speak as friends tonight. We hope that you'll experience a really supportive space where you can share any questions that you have too. We'll be using the question and answer function, and please pop any questions in there that you have as we go along. We'll speak as a panel first, and then we'll move to the Q&A. We'll also speak as professionals finding ourselves at the heart of one of the fastest growing crimes against children and young people. Financially motivated sexual extortion, where people are forced into paying money or meeting other financial demands after an offender's threatened to share either nude photos of them, or semi-nude photos, either that they have sent or growing very rapidly, fake images that have been created by the offender, is growing very, very rapidly, facilitated by many of the platforms that we all use. So tonight we want to support you to deepen your understanding of the issue, to think about it through different lenses, to learn more about the criminal tactics to help support children, and to talk about the most effective response, what we can all do, and the conversations that are so vital. So, Ros, thank you so much for being here. I wondered if we could start with you. I know how precious it is for others to hear from you and to have the opportunity to speak with you. I think it's really important that we start with Murray. Could you share his story with us?
So Murray was my lovely 16-year-old son. He was the middle of my three boys. And then over the Christmas holidays, we lost him. He took his own life because he fell victim to sextortion. It all happened in a terrifyingly quick space of time. We had a perfectly normal family day on the Friday, the 29th of December. He went up to his room perfectly normal, perfectly happy, and I found him dead the next morning in his bedroom. It was 2 weeks before the police managed to get onto his phone, and once they got onto the phone, they could see that he'd been a victim of extortion over the Instagram platform. Somebody purporting to be a young girl had contacted him, there'd been chat, they'd got him to share an intimate image, and then it immediately became apparent that they weren't a young girl at all. And whatever they said, I haven't seen this, whatever they said to him made him absolutely panic. And the age and stage he's at, it would have felt like an absolute life catastrophe. He didn't come through. We were in the room just along the hall. His brother was in the room next door. Whatever they said to him, he just went into blind panic and saw no other way than to take his own life.
You've been so incredible talking about this so much over the last few weeks, and I think just single-handedly have raised so much awareness for us. Like, what's where, I know you can't talk about the investigation much, but how has the journey been since it happened? What's been the sort of, what's that process been like?
It's been horrific. That the perpetrators are are probably in Nigeria. They're pretty sure they're in Nigeria. I'm not holding out a lot of hope we're going to see justice. So very much feel the only thing we can do to try and bring something out of this as a positive is to try and raise awareness and to stop this happening to another family. And then also to sort of try and put pressure on the big platforms like Instagram and Snapchat and what have you, and Meta as a whole, who aren't doing nearly enough to protect our children. I was vaguely aware of sextortion. I'd had all those conversations with my boys about, don't accept friend requests, don't share images, but I hadn't, until this happened to Murray, I hadn't looked into it. I hadn't appreciated how clever and manipulative these criminals are. They're approaching the kids because they look like a friend of a friend. It's not, Murray probably didn't accept a random friend request because he knew not to do that. But, and then, we've heard loads of kids anecdotally since this happened that this has happened to, and it's even been sort of people pretending to be from like a neighbouring school. So, these guys are really manipulative, and all the conversations you have with your child and try and make them safe, for a start, they don't listen because what do you know? And, they roll your eyes at you and you're just nagging them. But it's also, they live in the digital world, our kids, and, they think they know best. But I think something when somebody looks like they're the friend of a friend on a platform, that young person doesn't think they're speaking to a stranger. They just believe that that's that, oh, well, my friend must know them. And these perpetrators know that. They know how to manipulate. They've evolved. They started off, I think, as Paul said, they were the ones that sent the emails 10, 20 years ago saying they were a Nigerian prince and please send me your bank details so I can transfer my millions. They've evolved as the technology has evolved and facilitated these more sophisticated scams.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it is going to be really important tonight. I really hope we'll be able to give everyone on the call the knowledge to bridge the gap, to have more conversations, because obviously, like you're saying, Ros, we do desperately need to close that gap in terms of knowledge, but we've also got to be so aware that the tactics are going to be continually evolving, like all the time. And then we'll come on to later, like thinking about what conversations we can have that move beyond those. But like you were saying, so Paul, I think it would be really helpful if you could just explain to everyone a bit more about the kind of global picture that Ros is talking about and the kind of tactics side of this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So yeah, as you both mentioned, financial sextortion is the fastest growing crime targeting teens. It is a public safety emergency, and the growth of it is just completely out of control at this point. Over these past 2 years is when it has really exploded, beginning in 2022. So just to give some numbers here, in the United States, back in 2021, there were only 139 reported cases of financial sextortion. Fast forward just 2 years to 2023, that number was 26,000. 139 to 26,000 cases in the span of 2 years. Even then, authorities estimate that less than 10% of cases are getting reported to authorities. So, when we say 26,000 cases, it's probably closer to 250,000. If we continue at the current rate without awareness, without platforms implementing any safety controls, it's going to double again the next year. So we're going to be looking at 50,000 reported cases by the end of this year, or 500,000 victims. So yeah, this I think is the number one threat, I think, in the kind of cyber social world at the moment. So that has led me to focus on this over the last really year or so, researching it, publishing on it. So if it's all right with everyone, I'll kind of quickly share my screen and my research here. Just a bit of background about me. I'm a cyber threat intelligence analyst. So I've been focused on, all sorts of financially motivated cyber crimes. I've never worked in the space of like child safety before. So it was very kind of interesting to see these typically financially motivated perpetrators, now going into a space where they're sexually exploiting children, traumatizing them. Like this has never been done before by these sorts of criminals. So yeah, what we call it here is a digital pandemic in our report. This is publicly accessible online, so give it a search and you can find it. Yeah, just some sort of the key takeaways here. Financial sextortion, at the time of this report, we knew that it was the most rapidly growing crime targeting kids in the US, Canada, and Australia. We now know that it is also in the UK as well, now that more data has been published. Nearly all of this activity is linked to West African cybercriminals known as Yahoo Boys. And the three platforms that they're primarily targeting these English-speaking kids on are Instagram, Snapchat, and Wiz. During our investigation, we found that these criminals were openly sharing their scripts and their tactics, their how-to sextort guides on websites like TikTok, YouTube, and Scribd. After the publication of this report, we also found dozens of Facebook groups where they were sharing blackmail scripts and methods and how-to guides just out in the open. As Ros mentioned, they're using, very advanced social engineering tactics to make them seem like a real person. As someone who has given trainings before and presentations about, creating a fake account or identifying a fake account online, I can definitively say that these accounts that they're using are more convincing than ever before. They appear to be a mutual friend of a friend. They're using very realistic photos. I've looked at some of these accounts and they are indistinguishable from an authentic account from, someone, a teen girl, what her account would look like. And lastly, artificial intelligence is starting to become a bigger factor where even if a kid decides not to return a photo once they ask for one, some criminals are already just creating an AI generated photo using like a Nudify sort of application, and then blackmailing the kid that way. So a kid can do everything correctly, not send a photo, and they can still get blackmailed by this. These criminals, since they are financially motivated, their goal is to target as many people as possible. Looking at some of their accounts on Instagram, they're following up to 100 new kids a day, and trying to message every single one of them. I've used some of my research accounts to also identify what schools that they're trying to target, but that's such a small scale of what they're actually doing, because I can only look at trace a couple different accounts at any given time. So yeah, just quickly moving on to some of the visuals here. Google searches on sextortion and related queries like how to report sextortion, how to delete Instagram account. All those searches are way up in the past 2 years. The Reddit community, our sextortion, growing at an exponential rate. Interestingly, I think we found a statistic somewhere here. How to blackmail someone with pictures is trending on Google search in Nigeria, trending up 850%. Most of these criminals, they're going online, they're sharing their guides, how to blackmail. This one showing blackmailing on Wiz. This one showing a criminal literally in the act of taking a screenshot of someone's Instagram follower list. And they are just so blatant about it because they think they'll never get caught because they're 6,000 miles away. On TikTok, some of these blackmail scripts that they're actively using got over 75,000 views. YouTube, we found this video in 2024. It had been up there for 2 years, since 2022. This was the exact script that was used in the death of Jordan DeMay. The Bloomberg article actually uncovered that. I didn't know that at the time. So as I mentioned, we're actively seeing these used against real victims. The platforms, by their own policies, they don't scan messages, so there's no way for them to actually detect the script. So we're of course asking them to implement other safeguards. I think I will I don't want to take too much time here, but ultimately, we were also seeing quite a lot of, if someone does pay that extorter, it's not just one payment and they're done. They say that they're going to delete the photos after you pay. It becomes a constant ask for more and more and more money. So the advice is always just don't pay, block the criminal, either deactivate your accounts, or if you really don't want to deactivate your accounts, at least change all your usernames and your display names so that criminal can't search you from another account. And we know these criminals are running dozens of accounts. So I think that's some of the important advice. If you do become a victim, do report it, talk to parents, trusted family members. And I'm sure some more advice and comments will come up in the Q&A or anything, later on. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, like, it really is just incredible to have you here with us tonight, and I'm so grateful that you're here. I think that, well, firstly, we're going to be sharing your report and some resources with everyone that's here tonight. You'll get an email with a document tomorrow that's got all of that contained in it. But tonight's purposes, can I zone in on those three platforms that you just kind of whizzed by there? So we're thinking about Instagram, we're thinking about Snapchat, and you also mentioned in your report Wiz. I know that you've had this kind of frustration with the fact that you give some really clear messages about what the platforms could be doing to prevent this. And you touched on there how Instagram makes follower lists public, and that's a big part. When we look at the scripts, that's a big part of the issue around that currently, where they're levering those follower requests. Could you just explain just really quickly a few more of those kind of key insights about Instagram, Snapchat, and Wiz that just frustrate you, where you're there going, come on, guys, this could be, this is real
Yeah.
change is achievable on this.
Yeah, so on Instagram, the biggest thing they could do to prevent this is make teens' followers and following lists always private by default. So the moment that you accept a catfish or a scammer's follow request, even if they look like a real person, your entire social network is compromised. The moment that you accept that their follower request, they're screenshotting all your followers, your follower lists, and that is the blackmail that they use against you. So a platform can easily hide that. We look at Meta's Facebook, and Facebook has that option. You can keep your friends always private, even to your own friends. Instagram, they don't allow that privacy setting. There's other things that are easily detectable from a platform side, like these criminals are using the same images and videos repeatedly across hundreds or thousands of profiles. So when an account is reported for sextortion, shouldn't they look at those images and say, like, hey, we're going to block any future use of these images on the platform? There's other practical things like just, identifying account takeovers, accounts that are logging in from Nigeria for the first time, and then they send 100 follow requests to teenagers here in the US or UK or elsewhere. Just things like that.
That's a
Platforms.
great help. The other one that I think is really helpful that you mentioned in your report is the use of the live feature in Snapchat, and how how difficult it is for a child to understand that isn't, because they're using the live feature, because they're using an AI tool in the background to make the image appear slightly animated. That adds another layer. And just like Ros was saying, we've got to understand the kind of level of criminality involved in this and the kind of tactics that they're using. And I think it's really helpful that you've linked that up with the fact that the child just can do everything right and this still happens. Yeah, thank you. I think, Kasia, could I ask, looking at this picture across Scotland, are you seeing the same patterns as well that Paul's describing?
Yeah, definitely. Even when Paul was mentioning the increase in reports, it is quite similar in Scotland. If we look back at 2021 or 2020, maybe we haven't seen that many reports of sextortion, but when we start looking at 2022, 2023, we see gradual increase to the point that there's like over 60% increase in 2023 of reports, sextortion incidents. And I think this is why it's so important when we do go out and we do speak to schools, to practitioners, to pupils, to parents, to carers, we do ask that these incidents are reported every time. And as much as obviously it is difficult to trace the perpetrators because of everything that we've just heard that Paul told us, and that again is exactly the same picture in Scotland. These perpetrators are based overseas. These are organized crime groups that are outside of the UK, even though we still recommend and we still plead to everyone to report it to us for that picture to be better developed and better analyzed, for us to be able to understand the trends, to understand the demographic, to understand the modus operandi and how these organized groups kind of carry these crimes out. It's important for us, for police, to know this as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I think what an amazing thing that NCA alert went out at the level and the scale that it did, and at the timing that it did. But I do think it's hard for parents and carers and professionals to unpick that sequence where it's like, okay, well, in that alert that I'm sure many of you will have received, you could see that one of the really important things is how we prepare to support children and young people for when this does happen. And just like Paul's describing, if we're going to see this massive increase, how are we preparing to support? And the alert mentions a number of different tools. And the key thing that we all need to understand is that it's not actually just using one of those tools. You kind of have to use them in combination. So just like Kasia's saying, yes, it's making the report to the police, but also in the NCA alert, there's reference to take it down and the report remove tool, which are the ones that you can use to really important also for empowering the children, that they know about those tools so that they know that there's something that can be done. But when we're working with children and young people, they make the point that, but the person will still have my photos. And there's that power, what they know that the person still has the images. And and so it's doing these, it's really good, helpful to have that from you, Kasia, where it's like we've got to do these things in parallel. Also think that children right now are incredibly disillusioned with the lack of remedy that they get from reporting things generally online. So they're very used to, from a very young age, the fact that if they make a report on Roblox about something, no one does anything. If they make a report on, so we as adults have to empower them that even if reports don't seem to always be working on the face of it, from the earliest possible age, we've got to empower them that they're really important for all the reasons that you're explaining, and that we're going to stand there with them and bridge that gap for them around that. And I think children can understand this like imperfect justice around it, but we also have to do so much better for them. Yeah,
absolutely, Annabel. And apologies.
No.
And I'm glad that you've mentioned report remove tool. That is something that Childline has developed together with Internet Watch Foundation. And when we do go out and speak to children and young people, we always mention it to them, and we always make sure that they know what it is, they know how to access it. We speak to teachers, we speak to carers and parents as well, and we make sure that we repeat that name over and over again, because just like you said, there's that they lose control over that image, and we try to put that control back in their hands, to tell them that there's a tool that allows them to report it, to report remove, to upload that picture, to find that picture as much as it's possible. Not always is, unfortunately, but it is something to give them that power back, to give them that control back. Because as you say, you can report it to the platform, you can report it to Police Scotland, you can go and speak to someone you trust, absolutely. But for our children, young people, the life online is so important for them. This is something there's no longer, this is a merged two lives, isn't it? It's not offline, online. It's a life for them. So it's not as easy as to say, delete your account. Because for them, this is pretty much, game over for them, because for them it's something that they use to be in touch with the world, to navigate that world, just like their peers do. So yeah, when we do go out and we do speak to them and we provide preventative messaging, it's one of the most of the important ones that we mention. And obviously all other different support mechanisms that can be found online, that parents can find useful, that children can find useful as well.
And we can share them. And but I think that to get that clear messaging out there tonight to everyone, that we need to make the reports to the police as well, and that it's doing it in parallel and with the report to the platform. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we're thinking about this, we're talking about these very fast changing tactics. We're talking about the need to close that gap in the conversations. But ultimately, we've got to acknowledge as well that the tactics are going to constantly be outpacing us. And so it does come back to conversations. And what we all need to do to lobby the platforms. Ros, could I come back to you? You mentioned about I saw you say this in a BBC interview about the eye rolling point, which I think is such a good one. What if there's a conversation that you would love everyone on this call to go and have with their child, with their what is there another conversation that you either wished, yeah.
I wish I'd spoken more about it, but I wish I'd spoken more about the flip side, that if something goes wrong, it's never the end of the world, and just come and get help. I wish I'd appreciated how different a 60-year-old's life experience was, that as an adult you can see, oh God, if somebody shares photos of me, that's embarrassing, I'll be mortified at work, but you're not going to lose your job, you're not going to get to uni, he'll have been getting told that will never work, he'll not get to uni. Like, you as an adult, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. It would have been possibly a horrible 2 weeks at school while everybody laughed at him, but it would have passed. So that's, as well as the internet safety or the online safety, I wish I'd drummed home to them that it doesn't matter if something does go wrong. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake, and everything can be. There's nothing that can't be fixed.
Yeah. After we first spoke about it, I went and had a conversation with my eldest, and I found myself virtually shaking while I was having it, even though this is what I do day in, day out. And as I sat down to say to him, there's nothing you can ever do that, nothing that can ever happen, nothing you can ever do that I'm not going to help you with. And I told him Murray's story, and I found that was probably the most powerful conversation I've ever had as a parent. But I found it was surprising to me how hard it was to. It was quite a challenge to have it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Ros. Do you think anything from your side, Paul, that you would add to that?
Nothing I would add. I think that's spot on. I mean, just to show, there have even been cases of financial sextortion where the kid went to the parents, they sorted it out, they supported them all the way through it. And the unfortunate outcome still happened, where the kids still saw no way out, even after getting that help and resource. So it is a really scary thing. Nothing beyond, I think what Ross said, just letting them know that, you got their back. And, of course, everyone has the conversation, don't share nudes, don't do that sort of thing. But it's definitely emphasizing, if something does go wrong, or when something does go wrong, because it's inevitable, just come to us, we'll deal with it, and it won't be the end of the world.
Yeah. Kasia, I know that this is an issue that massively affects boys at the moment, although so for everyone listening, is there any advice that you specifically give around understanding that part of the problem?
I think we would need to go back to look at the motivation that young people have, or the motivation behind sharing images, and what that means for them growing up and exploring themselves, exploring their sexuality, because that is part of growing up. We were teenagers once as well. We were just lucky enough that was never almost, there's no kind of evidence of certain things we've done when we were teenagers, but each of us has taken a risk at some point in our lives, and especially when we're that age. So that element of risk is very present in teenagers' lives at the moment. There's a little bit of pressure there as well. But yeah, I think, for girls it's a bit different than boys. Boys are maybe a bit more kind of open. They're more open to getting to know people online. They may be kind of less suspicious of things, or not question things as much as girls would do. Also, the way maybe us as a society prepares girls differently and boys differently to risks and harms they can come across. And I think we maybe have to look at the kind of education element of it as well when it comes to online safety. It's a completely different world now. It's something that they have to navigate themselves. They teach each other how to navigate it. As from what I can gather from speaking to teenagers and going out to schools. So I think that's probably the reason behind it. A big reason for it is also having their profiles on social media platforms public. And Paul rightly mentioned, if a child signs up for Snapchat or Instagram or any platform, by a default, if that child is under a certain age, that profile should be protected, with certain settings that are default settings, not the ones that you have to actually do it yourself. And I think the motivation behind it is could be the reason why boys are mostly targeted, and also because those perpetrators create mostly young, attractive female accounts as well. So there you go. There's your kind of target audience for it. There is your demographic straight away. They would rather create a young, attractive-looking female account and basically send out what we call like a scattergun, blanket invitation or request to follow, and just in the hope that someone is going to catch the bait. And usually, young boys and young men are the ones who do it.
Yeah, and I think also understanding how they, there's so much shame around this as an issue, and there's so much the gendered norms in terms of boys not being able to talk about these things. There's a definite kind of vulnerability there that they seek to exploit.
Yeah.
I'm aware of time, Caroline. I haven't had a chance to look at the Q&A. Everyone on the call, if you have any questions for the panel, would you just pop them into the Q&A section for us? That would be like a huge help as we go along. Caroline, was there anything?
Come in, yeah.
Yeah.
So we could maybe get onto that. So one of the questions was around, is there any recommendations around what age children should be allowed to have social media access?
I mean, I don't mind taking that one if it helps. I mean, the problem that we're seeing at the moment, obviously, is this incredibly early access to social media, and it's not giving us enough time to get in the really key education elements that we need to be doing with the children while they're developmentally young enough that we've got time to do it with them. So we definitely need parents to support us in delaying access to social media so that we can teach those key messages. But what we're seeing here with financially motivated sextortion is that all of the children that we're talking about here are of an age where they're beyond the age where they're able to sign up for a social media platform themselves. So we're talking about predominantly 13 to 18-year-old boys being targeted. So it's slightly different to that kind of wider social media debate. It's at the stage at which children are, and I'm sure Ros could probably speak to this as well, but once we've passed that hurdle of delaying the start of social media, we're at the age now where this is building their social space towards heading off to university. It's so important for their social development now in that stage. Ros, anything that you'd want to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Murray was 16. He was allowed to be on all the platforms by their own safeguard, by their own age rules. He wasn't. I think it's two different debates, isn't it, as to what age should children be getting allowed onto social media? And I agree, it's becoming far too young. But I think this issue, it's children that are of an age that they can, without breaking any rules, be on the platforms, and they're getting targeted.
Yeah, I can see a flood of questions now, Caroline.
So there's a couple around resources that are child friendly and maybe related to the discussion we were having about how to have the conversations. So is there other resources that are child friendly?
Child-friendly resources is a really good one that I'll share tomorrow, which is called No Escape Room. And it's by the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children in America. It's an interactive game that you can do just like an interactive film. It's really good. Probably recommended for ages about 13 plus. You could probably pull it down a little bit younger, but that's probably I would say the standout resource for use with children and young people. In terms of supporting positive conversations, yes, there are some, again, I'll share them with you tomorrow, but we're going back to the key principles of, just having really regular, open, non-judgmental conversations where you're letting the child lead all the time. You are, talking about things through indirect lenses is always really powerful. So using like Murray's story, talking about everything that you're seeing in the media around this, and asking them to show you things that they might have seen that relate to it, building it out from there in that way. And I do think for me personally, going back to that, the most powerful conversation of all is the conversation where it's that there just isn't anything. We understand as adults how quickly this is changing. There's nothing that they can ever do. There's nothing, things will go wrong online. There's nothing that they can do that we won't help them with. Anything else sorry, I jumped in there, got a bit enthusiastic.
Annabel, I would probably also add CEOP resources, which again we'll share with everyone tomorrow.
Yeah.
One in particular, Ask the Awkward, that gives you these little prompts and these little kind of conversation or starters that if you're struggling with how to kind of do it, but not sounding too parenty, then that's a really good resource that we always recommend to when we go out and speak to parents and carers, and if we do any presentations and put in children's homes as well for the staff that work there.
Yeah, well, that's really good, Kasia. We'll share that link tomorrow. And the great thing about the CEOP resources is once you've gone in, you get directed around really well through them. So that's really great. Yeah.
So there's a couple of questions also about the linkages with schools and education, and I guess people are interested to know, is this being discussed in schools? Is this part of young people's education? I know obviously, Annabel, you do a lot of work here in the Northeast. So yeah, maybe people can kind of give a description of what's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to leap in again, but I suppose that is exactly my area because that's what we do at Cybersafe. We're in the schools all the time on this. So, yes, it is. Although I think that again, we're closing that gap all the time, trying to close that gap because we're having to talk about issues which are where the children are having experiences that they're not developmentally ready for at a younger age, and then you're having to and that's taking us to a wider issue kind of thing. We've got a gap to close there. So on sextortion itself, a really important thing to know is that it is incredibly hard for children and young people to share these experiences, even given everything we say. A child is 70% more likely to share with a teacher in a school than they are with a parent or carer when we're talking about online child sexual abuse. So having more of these conversations in schools, having that as an incredibly important part of a picture at schools, at youth groups, in other settings. Many children don't have anyone that they can share this with at home anyway. So even allowing all of those things, we've got to, bridge that gap in every way that we can, which is why everyone on the call is so important to this. There's something each one of us is going to be able to do. I know that. Yeah, it's been a great encouragement to us to see how many people from different kind of walks have signed up for tonight. So thank you.
Great. Just looking at some more of the comments. So lots of really beautiful comments thanking Ros for sharing her story. Also quite a few comments with a similar theme around the AI side of things. So people saying that they're kind of worried about AI and how this is accelerating the pace of these crimes and how it's being used in a way that puts young people at a real disadvantage because they're so sophisticated. So some of the questions I guess that are related to that are like what's happening, what's happening in terms of the government, how are they responding to this? Like, should there be more done to lobby to make sure that things are being put in place, that we can put pressure on the social media companies, for example?
Yeah, so we currently need a law change around in relation to AI and some of this. We've got a bit of a gap in the law that we need to close very quickly. But the children need to know that it is our protection of them needs to be as strong if it's an AI generated image as if it's just an image that they've sent. Because ultimately it's if we look at like the law in Australia for this, it's really important. It's an indecent image of a child, and it gives the adult or the perpetrator a massive leverage power over the child. So I think that there is a lot to do in that space. I think that it's something that we would love to keep in touch with you all about. You can definitely be having these sort of conversations, like locally building this within your community, starting to think about all of this and the challenges that are coming is really important. Paul, would there be anything that you would sort of be wanting to add on that?
So yeah, I think you're spot on that we need like legislation around AI to prevent the AI component from getting out of control. But at the end of the day, I think that the cat's out of the bag, that technology is already open sourced and criminals are going to continue to use it no matter what. I think the positive side, if there is one to that, is that kids who are getting sextorted with their actual photos can then now just plausibly say, oh, hey, that's weird. I didn't know AI could do that. If their photos get leaked or something like that, just pretend it's AI generated and just move on. No big deal, hopefully.
I've not heard anyone say that before. I'm like, my brain's just trying to, yeah, I had someone say something to me at once at a conference to say that we're getting to the stage where we need to teach a child that this is something that they're almost going to experience. And I have to say, I found that the most depressing conversation I'd ever had in my life. I was just like, our children and young people need to know that this isn't, it just isn't, we shouldn't.
I think it's depressing that we are trying to educate every child in Scotland rather than holding the platforms to account to put in the protections at source.
And yeah, let's talk a bit more about that, Ros. Let's say a bit more on that, because you have had this journey. So since this happened, I mean, I know we can't talk about the case in much detail, but really it's been 5 months and there's been...
But it's more, Paul knows more than me. There are so many basic things that the platforms could be doing that would make our children much safer, and they're not. So instead, we are all trying to educate every child across the world. And that's a ridiculous situation to be in. There's no other sector or industry that's so unregulated and seems to have such a disregard for the duty of care that they have for their clients, their users. And they're getting away with it because they are so big now. I think they're pretty untouchable, but I think it's the only way that they're going to change the platforms is if everybody boycotts them or something. That's not going to happen because there's no fine that could be imposed on that's going to be more than a tiny drop in their profits. So I just think it's a really upside down situation that we're trying to educate every child about these dangers rather than going after the platforms to sort of try and alleviate safeguard, stop the dangers from happening in the first place.
I wonder if, subject to anything else that's in the Q&A, Caroline, that might be a good place for us to close out tonight. And perhaps that's our ask from tonight, as well as everything that we've been able to talk about. I hope that the conversation tonight will help you to go and have conversations with the children and young people in your lives. But please also use it to let the world know that Scotland is educated on this issue and that we're not just going to tolerate this situation with the platforms, that we want to see real manifest change. We will not lose another child as precious as Murray. we want to see real change, and that we're not just going to accept that as a nation. So I think that would be perhaps a place where we could end. Is there anything else to say, everyone?
I want to say thank you to everyone for all of your questions, and let you know that we will keep a hold of them and make sure that we can answer them outside of today. A few people had asked about the recording and whether or not they would have access to that, because this actually would be a really good conversation starter. So someone had suggested that they might want to share it with their young person. So yes, there is a recording, and we will follow up tomorrow with a little resource pack with more information about what we've discussed and lots of handy links.
In the meantime, I can't thank you all enough. Thank you, Ros. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Kasia. Thank you all for coming. Please keep in touch with us on social media, and there's a short survey when we log off this call. A huge thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this vital webinar. Please help us to raise awareness by sharing it as widely as you possibly can. We would also love your help to support more children and young people. You can do this by grabbing your free resource pack. The links to that will be in the description below, and going to our website to donate so that we can run more events like this. Together we can prevent online abuse and exploitation. Thank you for watching.